Scott Sloan here with you, 700 WLW. 'Tis the season, right? We have the Red Kettle campaign from Salvation Army. We have all sorts of charities like Child Focus and Dragonfly and Cancer Free Kids. Last night I'm flipping around watching the news, and they're doing the Ruth Lyons thing over on 5. I'm seeing this time of year, of course, is the time for the giving season. Now, here's a big question. We as Americans are notoriously generous with our money, with our time, our talent, and our treasures. We should be, because all of us have a certain gift to share. Some may be more in volunteering, but for many of us, you look at it, you go, hey, you know, I think I've got more than enough, or a little I can spare and give to those less fortunate. That is a critical part of who we are as Americans. Instead of letting the government do a lot of stuff, we like to do it ourselves and hand out money to the charities that we think are worthy. But there's a story that's been circulating recently about a donation drop, that there's a sharp decline in charitable giving, which would really set a different precedent here. And I guess you got to find out why, or even if it's true. And joining me on the AcuteHearingCenters.com hotline is Tyler Talman. Tyler is a founder and president of the Carrington Group. What they do is they advise clients with wealth and essentially help them develop charitable tax plans and the like, too. So, Tyler, good morning. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, great to be on the show, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so the story is led by the fact that United Way, that they have been down. They're down like 28% over the last 10 years. And, of course, when you think of charitable enterprises, United Way is always at the top of the list. They're the big one. But overall, I'm looking at the numbers because I thought, man, it just doesn't seem right to me. And the facts are from last year, the charitable donations increased actually from $410.2 billion to $427.2 billion. Corporation giving gave up 1%. Foundations were up 1%. Individual giving was down 2%, and bequests were down, or about flat at 9%. But overall, it jumped from $410 billion to $427 billion. So how can donations be down?
Well, I think a lot of the statistics and the things that you're looking at that's being reported on is really looking at charitable giving from the change of 2017 to 2018. Of course, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2018 just had a really tremendous impact on charitable giving. And for those on the line that don't know what that is, you know, this was simply President Trump doubling the standardized deduction for families to $24,000. This simply meant that fewer households were itemizing and taking a deduction for charity. So when you look at all of that, you know, depending on what statistic you're looking at, Scott, I mean, according to the National Council of Nonprofits, through the first half of 2019, they were showing a 10% decrease. So, you know, I think as much as individual giving has potentially gone down, I think that we've also seen an increase in corporate giving and foundation to foundation giving.
Yeah, I guess, and the point is, because you're so right about that, Tyler. I'm not a numbers guy, but statistics, to me, you can manipulate them to say anything, right? And we've seen that before, and you don't know who or whom to believe. But I guess the way I look at it, to me, and tell me if this is the right way to think, and I understand what happened, the 2017 tax laws changed, but if you're a foundation, if you're a corporation, those are just simply financial tools, right? And those tools are used by people to make a charitable donation. So I guess if I look at it, does it matter if the actual number of gifts dropped when the overall money is up, if indeed the overall money's up?
Yeah, I think the challenge that we're really having and what charities are dealing with as a headwind right now is just a lot of the unpredictability. So it really becomes a budgeting issue for them, where they're trying to figure out year in and year out when they're going to expect donations, the size of those donations, and working with their biggest donors to create some sort of predictability for those donations. But, you know, Scott, one of the things that I think is in play right now that it's not talked about enough is really the generational difference that we're dealing with. I mean, you look at millennials and Gen Xers, and their approach to charitable giving is just different different than the boomers. And it doesn't mean that they're not charitable. It just simply means that the way that they look at it is very different. I mean, one of the biggest issues, and I know you know this as well as anybody that's in play right now, is the student loan debt that the younger generation's carrying when they get out of school. I mean, we've got 44.7 million student loan borrowers in the United States right now, over $1.5 trillion of student loan debt. And when you think about the younger generation, and that over 70% of those kids are taking out some form of student loan to go to college, that's a pretty staggering issue in itself. And so I think you couple that with how the younger generation really operates and the way that they digest information. It really has changed the landscape for charitable giving. I mean, look at social media. A young 20-something can wake up in his bed and see that his buddy has got some sort of a heart-wrenching campaign on a GoFundMe or a Kickstarter, and they've got a way to just directly flow funds to that individual cause, and that's just really creating a lot of unpredictability in the charitable space.
Yeah, and that's it. Now, I guess the question would be, do these numbers reflect that kind of giving, the GoFundMes, the Kickstarters, the direct contributions, or does it have to be funneled through an agency in order for it to count?
I think that the majority of our statistics are coming from the larger foundations. So the United Ways and these larger organizations is where they're pulling the statistics.
Right.
And, according to the research that I've done on this, the crowdfunding or crowdsourcing resources are not a part of those overall statistics. So maybe we're getting skewed numbers.
Yeah, and I think so because, and I go back to United Way, and they say, hey, we're down 30% or 28% now in the last 10 years. My God, no one's given any money. I'm like, well, is that the case, or is your business model broken? And I think the latter is true. I think that people look at United Way and going, wait a minute, I don't need an agency to take my money, skim a little off the top for operations. I get that. That's fine. But then distribute it to ones that they feel worthy when I could just give directly to the cause. It used to be you needed United Way to distribute the money to these groups. But in this day and age, as you said, with crowdfunding, I can go directly to the charitable group. With websites and social, I can donate. It's easier than ever to give money to large and largely unknown organizations that have just come on going, wow, I'm a kindred spirit. That one really hits me. I'm going to give some money. I'm going to Venmo some money. I don't have to write a check or show up. That's not only included in the numbers, but if you look at it just as United Way suffering, I would contend that their business model's outdated.
Hey, you make a great point. I mean, I think it depends on the charity and what it is that they're trying to deliver as their value proposition to whatever the cause is. I sit on a board in Dallas for a nonprofit organization, and we help kids who age out of the foster care system and provide scholarship, mentorship, and leadership training to these kids. So although the actual dollar that we receive from our donors is greatly appreciated as a huge part of it, the foundation, a lot like other foundations, we have a bigger value proposition. We're hands on with the kids that we're helping. So I think you make a great point that we don't need somebody to necessarily help us distribute money when you've got a lot easier access or easier routes to get that done.
Tyler Talman, founder and president of the Carrington Group, he advises clients with the help of charitable tax specialists and get it together. The story is that there's a donation drop in America, a sharp decline in charitable giving, blamed by the 2017 tax reform that President Trump signed in and increased the amount for families and to be able to not itemize, essentially itemized charitable deductions. So it reduced that pool, and now they're claiming, well, it's hurting the charities. But you think about it, I don't know if that's actually accurate. I think the measurement may be a little bit behind as we're talking about. And you mentioned up something too, Todd, I thought was right on point too. Is so you've got younger generations, you got Gen Zers, you got Gen and millennials who aren't giving as much because they're starting households later in life now. They're waiting to have kids. You have all this college debt. They're living at home longer than ever before. So naturally, if you don't have the money to be able to do the things you want, you're going to be less charitable financially. But is there a measurement, or should there be inclusion here for those who aren't giving money but volunteering? Because it seems to me like younger generations may not have the money, but they're volunteering and being active in much more things as opposed to just writing checks like the older generation does.
I think you're right on, Scott. I mean, I think that it's unfair to look at just dollars in. I mean, I look at the organization, the couple of organizations that I serve in, and the younger generation is very involved. They very much like to be a part of an inclusive environment. So, you look at the way that they use social media. You look at the way that they like to gather together with their friends to do things. And so time is absolutely just as important as the money that you're donating. And I think the younger generation, we're just seeing it from even a psychological perspective. That's just the way they operate. That's the world they live in, and that's the way that they're able to give their time back is through their service and helping out in those ways.
Yeah, I think it's unfair, and I'm not saying everyone who's older does this, but it's going to be older people that go, well, look, they talk about charitable and kumbaya and world and hugging and being a good neighbor, and they don't give any money. It's like, well, they don't have the money to give, but they show up and do stuff, and I think that's equally as important. It may even be more valuable because now you're putting you're taking actual time out of your day to be active and do something and represent and help a cause, as opposed to just simply giving some money. So I can make a case of saying that's just as valuable.
I agree with you, and I think that you made a really interesting point earlier, Scott. That the nonprofits out there, there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of ways that they're going about trying to generate donations and funds. I mean, you look at. I know right here in Dallas we have North Texas Giving Day, which is a humongous event. Most communities have these big crowdfunding resources. You look at Giving Tuesday that's in play.
Yes.
You have all of these different avenues that they're asking for money on an annual basis. And so I think nonprofits have got to stop and really look at their model and get back to the basics. I mean, the reality of it is nonprofits got to function just like a business. Budgeting is crucial. You got to keep cash reserves in place, and you've got to realize that there's going to be good years and bad years. There's going to be volatility in size of donation and timing of donation. So it's just a different world that we live in now.
Yeah, I'm on the board of a nonprofit. It's the same thing. It's tough because there's a lot of nonprofits out there. I think we're have more charitable endeavors than ever before, and it's hard to get them all funded, to be sure. But somehow that I guess it just chaps me that the first blush at this is somehow we have lost our generosity because the tax code changed. And because you're not allowed to itemize. I guess I get that from individual giving, but if corporate donations are up, the money's going. I just think we're not measuring a good chunk of that, which is the stuff we're talking about. I mean, how do you itemize, someone's charitable giving when they give time, or these charities you've never heard of before? It seems like we have way more charities than we used to because of the nature of what we talked about. It's easier to set these things up because of the digital world in which we live.
Absolutely, and I think one of the things that you've got to consider too that nonprofits are facing, and it's kind of turned into a buzzword out there, but this whole idea of the bunching approach, where basically an individual is just bunching donations in specific years,
right,
while limiting donations in other years. I don't see any real issue with that. I think that the way to combat this is just to be proactive. And I think what nonprofits have got to do, really relating to your point, talking about, that service is just as important as money, is you've got to create a relationship and trust with the end user. And these larger organizations are losing that. So they raise all of this money in large quantities, but they've lost the ability to create this trusting relationship with their largest donors and really understand what their donors' desire is for timing and size of that charitable gift. So it's like anything in business, it comes down to relationships, and charities have got to get back to the grassroots relationship building.
Well, I mean, look, this just this week, Pete Frates died, right? And this is the guy who popularized the Ice Bucket Challenge for ALS, and he raised an incredible amount of money, over $220 million worldwide, just by that whole thing. And this whole groundswell came up to a couple summers ago with the Ice Bucket Challenge, and $220 million is a lot of money over just one viral cause, and multiply that by all the things we've seen online, and that's you wonder if stuff like that gets measured,
I agree, and I don't have the answer to that question, but I think you're describing a good reason why that went viral, and it was absolutely geared towards everyone. So it was not, it didn't pick a generation. It didn't pick an age group. It created this inclusive approach to a really great cause, and people came together. They had fun with it, and everybody felt like that regardless of where they are, from a financial standpoint, that they could make a difference and that they could create awareness. And I think awareness is, as we've been talking about, is just as important as writing the check.
Tyler Talman is the founder and president of the Carrington Group. He advises clients when it comes to taxable donations and the like. And appreciate the time, Tyler. Thanks for the insight, and all the best. Happy holidays.
Hey, happy holidays. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks for coming on the show on the AcuteHearingCenters.com hotline. Yeah, I saw that and went, okay, there's a sharp decline in charitable giving. As I looked at the story, it's all about how United Way has dropped 30% in the last 10 years, which I don't think that's because we're less generous. Some may, again, a polarized and politicized thing. It's because Trump changed the eligibility levels for itemized charitable deductions in households. But if you look through the numbers and go, well, corporate giving is way up overall. And again, he had numbers. I have numbers here, and I guess it depends on what you want to look at. But according to Giving USA, it went from $410 billion in 2017, 2018 went $427 billion. So definitely an increase there. It doesn't matter if some sectors are down while others are up. Bottom line is you've got more money. And that might not all include, too, as we talked about, the Kickstarter campaigns, right? The GoFundMes of the world, too, as well as people volunteering their time. So Americans continue privately to give money, and I don't care if it's, and I think the money thing quite is also overrated, because whether you're giving money or your time, talent, treasure, right? Those are the big three, and we are extremely generous people. As much as we say we want the government to do stuff, we still privately give, I think per person, still as much, if not more, than anybody else in the world.